Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next Super Stock Live, March 10th. We are back with PharmaDrug, LMLLF, over-the-counter, PHRX on the CSE. Dan Cohen, the CEO. Dan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on. It's good to be back.
We got a lot of things to cover today. There's a lot of progress has been made just since the last time you were on, and really, I guess, it's one journey of 1,000 miles, to get to, a product, clinically, FDA approved to get into the market. It's a journey of 1,000 steps, right? So you're making those steps. It's, the journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first footsteps, right? And you've made more than a few already, just in the last couple of weeks.
Yes, we have.
So we're going to cover some of the latest data on the prostate data. Also, we'll talk about some of the DMT information on glaucoma, all that good stuff. Before we get into that, for anybody that's brand new to our program, our goal is to bring you, those stocks which have that 10x to 100x upside potential. So companies going after massive multi-billion-dollar market opportunities that are at a key inflection point, and they have multiple catalysts in place. In the last 18 months, 24 months, we've already had 9 of those stocks that have had massive increases in value, and they've all had those things in common. So let's find out if PharmaDrug is going to join that pantheon of winners. Please ask your questions after we get through the interview, and then decide for yourself. So with that said, Dan, I think we're gonna have some actually pretty good questions today. Dan, the main, I guess the main topic I want to talk about is, you're continuing to, broaden the use case for, PD001, Cepharanthine, which is really your platform drug, right? That, and also you have, of course, other natural-based medicines you're developing, like, DMT for, glaucoma. We'll talk about that, but for PD001, you're really, you have a couple of different indications you're going after. You want to talk about, I think the latest is the clinical data you've gotten on Cepharanthine or PD001 for treating prostate cancer. Talk about some of the significant, statistically significant data you've got.
So what we have is we've already announced that we filed provisional patents for the use of prostate cancer, for the use of Cepharanthine, our version of Cepharanthine, with chemo to treat prostate cancer. And that's because we had done 2 rounds of in vitro, tests just to see the different types of cancers that Cepharanthine would be, capable to treat. And then we saw that there was a combination when we combined the current chemo being used, or one of the chemos being used for prostate cancer and Cepharanthine, there was a very interesting synergy. So we filed, for provisional patents, and then we said, okay, well, we got to test this in an in vivo model, a living organism, and we did. And so how it's structured is that you dose it for 21 days, and then you let the animals rest without dosing for 7 days. And what we put out this past week was the 21-day results. So after dosing, after giving them medication for 21 days, and what we saw was there was a very, very strong relationship between adding the Cepharanthine to the chemo and seeing a larger tumor reduction over the same period of time versus the chemo that's being used, in a large way right now for
the number. Dan, so basically, because the numbers I saw in the press release, basically, here's what you have. You showed for prostate cancer, 64% tumor growth inhibition. With PD001 versus 37% for treatment with just the standard of care alone, which is cabazitaxel. Am I pronouncing that right?
Cabazitaxel. That's it. That's one of the chemos. That's one of the major chemos being used for prostate cancer. Yeah.
Okay, so basically 64% versus 37%. That's almost a double.
Yeah. So it's huge, and I really want to stress that. That we think it's a very strong relationship here between adding Cepharanthine to the chemo and seeing increased tumor reduction. Now, that's just the first part. First, we had these results in a dish, and that's great, but then you need to put it into a living organism to see whether you're going to get real results, and we've seen them. Now, the dust has to settle, and we have to figure out what our true goal is. The goal of this trial was to see, does it have a synergistic relationship, and can it increase tumor reduction? Now that we've kind of seen that, we've proven it for ourselves, now we're going to want to focus on tweaking, the dosage, the combo ratios, and figuring out, do you want to only focus on tumor reduction? Do you want to focus on reducing the negative effects of chemo, things of that sort? So that still all has to be figured out, because for this one, we only focus on tumor reduction, not also reducing chemo's effects. So there's work to be done, but this is huge, because now we're like, okay, we're seeing it in a real living organism model. So this first of all, significantly strengthens our patent application and our eventual patent once we believe it can get granted. But secondly, it allows us to move forward as this being a real potential for Cepharanthine. So we're really excited about it.
In layman's terms, kind of what we've seen so far with Cepharanthine, with kind of your reformulation of Cepharanthine, and we'll explain what that is, but so what we've seen so far is, sort of a consistent pattern of essentially it turbocharges the existing standard of treatments and standard of care. So if somebody's using chemo for whether it's, prostate cancer in this case, I think you've also had the same thing with esophageal
cancer, yes.
Esophageal cancer.
Still our main cancer, actually.
Yeah, so essentially with the addition of Cepharanthine with PD-001 in the treatment, it basically shows, a major benefit. Like, in this case, almost a doubling of results.
So there are lots of different chemos being used. But to show that there's a synergistic relationship between Cepharanthine and chemo in general, I think is much more positive in my mind than just showing that Cepharanthine can do something by itself. Because it's much easier to get it through the system, to get buy-in from the institutions, from the doctors, things of so on, to be adding to what's already being used and improving what's already being used, versus coming and saying, I got a completely different method of doing things. So for esophageal cancer, we're still going to be assessing what's better, using it alone or using it with chemo. But using it with chemo is probably a better way in terms of getting through the system. For prostate, we were from
to get
combining it, right?
Right. So to get like the FDA approval or whatever, so you're basically positioning this as a combination therapy.
Yeah.
And then at some point it can go off label for other things.
Well, once it's an approved drug, it's an approved drug, right? So yes, but I think the best way to get this approved would be to treat this as a combo drug with chemo. So we're also going to be testing. We've already started the next trial, which is for esophageal cancer, which is still our lead cancer. But I mean, there's a topic I want to discuss here that I don't think should be lost on people. I mean, I've had people ask me this question. You seem to still be trying to decide what you're going to use Cepharanthine for. And so at what point are you actually going to be moving it forward? We are moving it forward. So we had a pre-IND meeting with the FDA. Now, people need to understand that the most difficult part of getting into a clinical trial, an open IND with the FDA, isn't the efficacy, because that's what the trial is really there for. It's the safety. And so the CMC, which is all the manufacturing, the engineering, the chemistry behind the drug, is actually more important than proving the efficacy before getting into the clinic to try it on humans, right, who have the sickness. So we've already shown all of our science and our engineering to the FDA, and we got some glowing remarks. Now, I'm not telling you that we're already approved, but we had some glowing remarks in our meeting. So basically the message from the FDA was, go produce a pharmaceutical batch, i.e., a batch that's suitable to go into humans. So produce that batch, do the tests that need to be done. Now, if this were a new molecule, we could be worried about the results of some of these tests, but it's not. There's 70 years of safety data. So it's not like we're worried about its safety.
Yeah, this is, Dan, I think it's important.
Once that's done, then you can get into a clinical trial. So along the way, we can just still keep adding different use cases for it, but that's not slowing us down. We're already producing. We've started the production of the batch of cepharanthine that we are intending to use in a phase 1 and a phase 2. So that can't be lost on people. That's
human. This is gonna be. We're going to human trials now.
Yeah. So we're already planning. We're already moving towards human trials. So when you see us talking about esophageal, prostate, antiviral, which is something we'll talk about in about a month or so, which we've already talked about in the past, but it's not because we're flip-flopping. It's just we're adding use cases to the cepharanthine, but in our minds, we're already moving cepharanthine towards a human clinical trial. So I think that point needs to be made, that this is all added info and added capabilities, not flip-flopping in terms of where we're going to go, right?
Right, exactly. So I think also it's important for people to know a little bit about cepharanthine's kind of a little bit of the history. As far as the FDA concerned, you mentioned the safety, is, and this has a 70-year hit. So for anybody that's new, just give us a little bit of background of cepharanthine and why, what you're doing, that's how you're reformulating it, kind of like what's your focus with it.
So cepharanthine has been used in Japan for 70 years. So it's been an approved drug in Japan for 70 years. And Japan's got a very strict regulatory environment. These are institutions that we can trust. And so, for 70 years, if there were to have been adverse effects and side effects that, that were really bad, it would have been documented. And so it's been used safely in Japan for 70 years. The problem why it was never used for more serious things, it's been used for everything from snake bites to hair loss to malaria. Some people have tried using it for cancer. The problem, so it's always known that there's anti-cancer properties here. The problem has been that taking it in a pill I can get into the science, but it doesn't matter. But for some reason, there was only 7% bioavailability, 6 or 7%. That means for every 100 milligrams that you actually took, your body only received and used 6 or 7 milligrams. That's barely anything. So that's what always held it back. Now, there was a research institute in the US who actually took the cepharanthine and changed it. They reformulated it. They tweaked it. And with that, they've created a version that's 80% or 70 to 80% bioavailable. So we're talking about 10 times stronger than the pill that's being used in Japan for 70 years. Now, in Japan, you could have used it intravenously, but that would have meant going into the hospital every day for 3 hours. I mean, that's not something that people wouldn't be using it that way. So it didn't lend itself to being used that way. So now we got a way to produce the oral pill that has, 70 to 80% bioavailability. That's what makes this thing a game changer. We have it patented. It's a unique way of making it. And that's why we can start using potentially this drug in different ways that they knew they had potential for, but couldn't because of the lack of strength. And so that's what we're working on right now. So when we do these tests for the FDA, you got to prove safety, but we know it's safe. We just have to do those tests because you have to do them anyway. And also, you have to know limits, right? So, you can take one aspirin and it's not going to hurt you, but the FDA wants to know how many aspirins are going to actually hurt you, right? You actually have to define that. So these are some of the tests that we need to do because the FDA is obviously a serious organization and they're responsible for the safety of people that are getting treated. So these are certain tests that we have to do with the batch, but we're very cognizant of them. We think that it's just going to be template in terms of doing them, get that data, hand it into the FDA, and be in a position to be able to start a clinical trial. Which so up to the FDA, not to us, but we feel very comfortable with what we need to deliver.
Okay, so essentially, for now, the strategy is what is to for PharmaDrug. Essentially, you want to show cepharanthine being used as a combination therapy, right? To sort of like turbocharge these existing treatments.
Yeah.
Okay, and now how do you go about? So for right now, you're kind of doing clinical trials with 2 different cancers, right?
We're doing preclinicals, right? Not clinical, preclinical. Clinicals are already in humans.
Okay, right? But you're doing esophageal cancer, prostate cancer. How do you choose like what is in terms of your your research team, how do they choose which cancers to go after, or which potential indications to go after? Like what is
What we're
the
going to choose in the end is we already chose, we just reserve the right to change it, but we've already chosen esophageal cancer. But in the meantime, why stick to only one horse? Why not broaden out the case, especially since we believe there's potential for other cases, including antiviral? When it's time to actually put in that application, we'll put in the one that makes the most sense. But also, as you broaden the case of it, you can use it in different ways down the road. You also file patents, and maybe someone else wants to do a deal and say, we'll take it for this cancer or as an antiviral while we push the esophageal cancer.
Okay.
This is all, you
Which,
want to have patents and you want to have intelligence. And if your drug can be used for several different things, you might be only pushing it forward on one, but that sooner or later it can be used for other things as well. So but how do we choose it? Well, we always saw that the best work and the best unmet need for cancer was esophageal cancer. And that's how we got orphan drug designation to begin with from the FDA. There's been tons of tests by other people done in vivo, in vitro on esophageal cancer. And so we felt very comfortable with that. But before we started our own work, because you have to do your own work, you can't just rely on other universities or labs who have done their work. You have to do your own work. We said, okay, well, let's do this methodically. We started with 60 cancers.
okay.
And we narrowed it down to 20 in a dish, showed significant performance on those cancers versus chemo. Esophageal was the best by far. And then we did it again with 23 cancers, but this time not just cepharanthine versus chemo, but we also added a layer of cepharanthine and chemo combined. And that's where the numbers started flying on prostate cancer. So that's where we added the prostate cancer. But in that test, again, esophageal cancer was still the best one.
Okay. So this is what I was asking. So what was the process like? So you started with 60 potential indications, right? 60 different cancers.
Yeah.
And essentially you narrowed it down to 2 so far.
Yeah.
Potential, where cepharanthine actually had statistically meaningful results.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a possibility that it's going to broaden to additional indications in cancer, or?
For sure.
Okay.
But not now.
Okay.
Right now, we're going to stick to continuing to develop prostate, continue to develop esophageal cancer, and continue to develop the antiviral element as well. And I think that's enough, because basically we know we're moving cepharanthine forward. That's our goal. We just want to make sure that there's more than one way to go once we're ready to once that cepharanthine pharmaceutical batch is ready with the tests done that we're willing to submit to the FDA. At that point, we want to be in a position where, all right, when we hand in the submission, which one are we choosing? One of 3. Okay. You know what I mean? So it's going to be at the last, not second, but you know what I mean, in the final hour, decide which one we bolt on. Right now, we're saying that it's probably going to be esophageal cancer, and that's our goal. But there's nothing wrong with having 2 other cases being built at the same time to broaden that out and to increase the chances, right?
Yeah. Because also let's be realistic. Look, the biotech R&D. This is it's a high risk business, right? It may not work, right? It may not work. So you want to have, right. A lot of times, some of the most successful drugs developed, they did not work really for the original use that they were intended for, right? Like I think was it like Viagra was originally a hair growth or something, or was it a heart medicine?
Yeah, I forget what it was for, but
it was something completely different.
What it ended up being used for was just a noted side effect.
Yeah. So it's. And I think but that's the most famous example.
Repurposing.
Right?
Repurposing is a very common thing in biotech and pharma, right?
Okay.
Very common. So we're just delineating beforehand the different repurposes, right?
Right. So it seems like cepharanthine is very kind of a versatile platform. Now, one of the other applications is kind of the antiviral applications. I think originally where you got the drug from was they were developing it for treating for Ebola, right? I mean, this is for the U.S.
Yeah. This was developed,
Army, I think.
Yeah, this was developed, for by a research house in the U.S. With the U.S. Army in mind for Ebola. The fact that it's an antiviral, or that it is an antiviral, is we already know that. Just I could show you tons of citations. We have them in our press releases. We have it on our website. We're talking about high-end academic institutions, high-end scientific institutions doing the research, publishing the research. Cepharanthine is an antiviral in its potential, or it displays it in several types of tests and noted academic and other scientific journals. So that's actually what we went to the FDA for, was as an antiviral. So that's also an element that we're going to continue to push, right? Because the world needs more antivirals. Okay, hopefully COVID's reached its peak and we're moving on. The world doesn't need more antivirals. I mean, we had SARS, we had MERS, we had Ebola, we had Zika, we had COVID. I mean, these viruses are coming every few years, and
there's new variants. There's new variants constantly. Yeah. Is it possible to develop? Okay, so in other words, once you have the increased bioavailability, which is that's your intellectual property.
We have very low increased bioavailability,
and it's in a pill form. Is it possible to have almost like for PD, for this to be almost like, I don't know, a magic bullet, if you will, for treating different virus, almost like a
potentially
COVID or SARS or whatever?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, we have to do work, but yeah, I think there's plenty of. That's what I'm saying. There's been plenty of studies out there that keep pointing to cepharanthine. We have them on our website. You can go see them. These aren't our studies. These are third-party studies, but major scientific journals publishing studies that show the potential of cepharanthine on many different types of viruses. We've seen SARS, tests done on SARS, different variants of SARS. We've seen variants of COVID. We've seen on Zika even. We've seen scientific studies showing that cepharanthine has a potential on Zika. So but nobody took it to the clinic, meaning nobody took it into human trials because of the low bioavailability. Even if you could do it intravenously, okay, great. But if you're going to the hospital to take cepharanthine intravenously for COVID, it's too late. You want it so that you don't go to the hospital. So, there was just never a pill available that can be used to do it properly. That's what we have. So I don't want to underplay this. I'm talking about the cancer right now because we're plowing forward on the cancer, and we've got the prostate cancer in vivo results now, and we're going to have the esophageal cancer in vivo results coming, but we're still working on the antiviral. And I believe that's a massive potential. Yeah.
So essentially now cepharanthine, it's a naturally occurring compound, right?
It comes from a plant.
From a plant. Okay. Plant. So essentially, there's the common theme. If people are trying to understand, they're trying to understand PharmaDrug, is you're focused on essentially kind of naturally occurring, plant-based medicines or naturally occurring medicines.
So look, at the end of the day, there was a movement in biotech for many years where it was all, at this point we're more scientifically advanced. The best drugs need to come from a lab, right? And I think there's been a bit of a pendulum switch backwards now, saying, well, we don't know everything and we have to continue to do studies, but there's something about natural-based medicines, because sometimes there's something in these natural-based medicines that we think it's just this one ingredient in that medicine, but there's something else there that we haven't even figured out why. These cofactors, and so there's been a movement back towards natural-based medicines, and so that's what really we're very focused on, natural-based medicines, and that's what turned us on to this. But also, biotech, as we've talked several times, biotech is risky. Scientific research is risky. You want to de-risk it as much as possible. So this being a natural-based medicine that's been in use in 70 years significantly reduces one of the greatest risks, which is safety.
Right. This is
and that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. So some of the data you're getting, again, we're still very early stages, but it's very promising in terms of statistically significant improvements versus the traditional standards of care. So there's something here which I think for sure, as an investor, I'm looking at this, basically what's the market cap of the company right now is it's under 10 million. So it's for a biotech stock.
US maybe it's about 14, 15 Canadian.
Yeah, US. So it's like for biotech, where you're going after really a massive. These are multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. This is just on the cancer side, right? So there's, of course, still early stage, but there is enough. I think there's enough there where there's something here that's very compelling. Now, speaking of, again, playing into that theme of naturally based medicines, is you're developing a potential treatment for glaucoma, which is it's a massive multi-billion-dollar market, using a DMT, which is a psychedelic right? So explain exactly what's the kind of the method of action. What are you doing that's because when people think of psychedelics, they're thinking of trips.
Well, so we have a great chief scientific officer who's been working on infectious diseases and even oncology for his whole career, but he always had an interest in psychedelics. And himself is just is a mushroom forager, and so has been following the academic resurgence in psychedelic research that started in the late 90s, and always had a keen interest in that. And so when we got this started, we talked about going after the psychedelic sector, and we agreed right off the bat that we don't want to do a sickness that everyone else is doing. And people are doing some good work for depression. People are doing some good work for PTSD, but we can't be the next company to do it as well. Where's our added value? We're biotech. We have to have a commercial strategy. So we knew that we weren't going to focus on those sicknesses. Secondly, we really were lots of people are using psilocybin. LSD is a synthetic, and so what really turned us on because of our approach to biotech in general was DMT, because DMT is prevalent in nature. It's produced in many plants. There's, we're working with the University of Michigan. They are of the opinion that put out some great research indicating that there's likelihood that DMT gets produced in the human body. And so this is a naturally occurring substance. And to us, this makes sense. Let's look at that as a psychedelic. And so that's when we started looking at the mechanism of action on DMT and trying to understand that better. But we definitely saw that, there's a couple of receptors that respond to DMT, and those receptors are very related to glaucoma, and there was actually a pharmaceutical company in the 90s that looked into potentially using a DMT type substance, and they hit a wall and they stopped, and we found a different way of going about it. And so that's what we're working on right now, and we're working on something that we think could be groundbreaking.
Okay, what is it? Because I think the tryptamine, what is it called? It reduces
it reduces the interocular pressure.
Okay.
So there's this pressure that builds from the glaucoma in the eye, and that pressure ends up creating that blindness, right? And so how do you reduce that pressure? There are drops out there today that are being used, but people still go blind. So obviously this drop doesn't solve everything. It may for some and not for others, right? The problem is that they sting the eye. You have to put the drops in, so it's people forget to put them in. They don't want to because it stings. They don't put them on when they're sleeping, and so if you sleep 6 hours, 8 hours a night, that's a quarter or a third of the time of the day that you're not putting anything in. And so that's where we came up with this. Okay, if we can come up with a proper DMT or DMT analog, meaning that we're going to tweak the DMT to make it more suitable to put into the eye. And we can put it into a device that you put into the eye. And then there's a slow, consistent release. So then you solve that, I forget to put the drops in. You solve for I don't put it in while I'm sleeping. This is going continuously. We're looking at maybe probably 15 days. And so if you put every 15 days, you put a new product that you don't feel it. And then it just continuously releases that DMT analog for 15 days. Then you got yourself a beautiful package here, because you got a good delivery mechanism and you got a good potential remedy in terms of the drug, and very importantly, that's something that's patentable, right? Which is important for a biotech company, a commercial strategy. And so we've done the first round of tests with 3 different molecules because we're trying to get down to 1. We kicked 1 out. We actually wasn't really part. We were 6. We went down to 2. We ended up really adding a 3rd without officially saying it, but we did the first round of tests. all three were great. We kicked the third back out. We're still with those two. We're going to do a bunch of tests to figure out what the best one is. But they're both already with tests. We've already announced this, showing in a dish, this works, right? In a dish, right? And so much, we're so, excited by it that with our partners at Terasaki, we've already started working on the prototype. So we're probably about a month away of having the first version of that device that you can put in the eye that has the slow release. So we're already working on the prototype. So once we get all that done, then we'll do an animal model. And then we got something that we would like to go to the FDA with.
Okay.
We're developing a potential commercial product here, right?
Yeah. So basically, a PharmaDrug essentially has, there's multiple shots on goal here. There's a kind of a broad platform. You have you have 4+ potential markets you're going after. Is that did I do the math right? In terms of the cancer side, you have this 2 cancers so far.
Yeah.
You have you have glaucoma. Then the antiviral is still kind of that has kind of you haven't really done too much there so far, have you? Yeah, I mean that's still relatively
No, because that's what we actually officially went to the FDA for. So no, there's stuff going on behind the scenes. But right now we're just in terms of news dissemination. We're focusing a little more on cancer, but we're working on a couple of things behind the scenes for the antiviral side of things. So, we just don't want to, there's only so much you're going to talk about at once, but the message needs to be that we are still working on antiviral.
Okay. Let's get to some audience questions. We got a bunch of questions coming in right now, or a few questions anyway. A couple of questions along the same lines, which is you had the legacy business of the company, which was I think it was like a cannabis business or
so Germany, we're really working on some strategic realigning here. There's a potential legalization happening, and there's a lot of shifts going on in the market right now. Fundamentally, we're working on a bunch of strategic repositionings here, and so we'll update the market, soon on what's going on there. But I'll keep it at that for now.
Okay, but essentially PharmaDrug, the company going forward, I mean, the focus is going to be
biotech,
purely drug development, and that's it. So you're going to be selling off like legacy assets or spinning them out, or
I'm not going to say that at this point, but we really want to be focusing on the biotech. We have a very strategic asset in Germany, and we're looking to use that in the right way. Things were really difficult under COVID and the beginnings of the very strict, medical cannabis environment in Germany, and things are changing right now, and we're working on a plan.
Okay, let's kind of wrap up in terms of milestones coming up, because I think this is what everybody's going to keep their eye on, because these milestones are what are going to kind of reprice the stock in terms of clinical trials, more data, things like that. Which so what do you have that's coming up? What should people have their eye out on over the next let's call it 30 days?
Well, we've pressed go on the esophageal cancer, so we're going to get results on the esophageal cancer, and we actually used some of the results from this trial. We had that in the press release that the Cepharanthine alone did not cause any adverse reactions, and so we kind of like I said, esophageal cancer, we're going to be looking at esophageal cancer at Cepharanthine alone versus in combo. In prostate, we knew we were just looking at combo. So we also wanted to maximize or optimize what doses we're going to use for esophageal cancer, and we kind of worked on that a little bit at the same time. But we've pressed go on the esophageal cancer, and we'll have results. We're continuing to move the Cepharanthine forward in terms of that production, that GMP production that we're going to be doing all those tests on, and there's going to be some developments coming on the antiviral side, and as well.
Dan, I think okay. So in terms of maybe the layman's term, is what milestone out there that's on the horizon can really move the needle on the stock in terms of valuation. You know, in terms of what's out there that's like a game changer. Like, is it data? What out there could really?
Well, ultimately, a clinical trial, acceptance by the FDA for a clinical trial is going to be, but that's actually, we're talking way different type of evaluation, catalyst. But in the meantime, I think continuing to push forward on pushing esophageal cancer forward, and moving Cepharanthine towards clinical trial. And I think on the psychedelic side with DMT, I think, getting those results, choosing the molecule, building that prototype, just continuing to move this forward. I think that, there's a de-risking that happens towards what evaluation is for a company that's in a clinical trial with the FDA. And there's our valuation here, and there's a gap. And it doesn't just go from A to B. It moves up, right, towards it. And so it's continuing to execute on that. And we're in lockstep. We're going to be doing things every month to move towards that. So every month there are going to be, in my mind, milestones that we've hit to move us towards that.
Yeah, exactly. So so essentially, there is this journey of 1,000 steps or 1,000 miles, or whatever it is, between where you are now and FDA approval, commercialization. There is a lot of
even the beginning of a clinical trial, even
right? Which actually, that's where the stock gets kind of repriced. So it's no longer a 50 million valuation. All of a sudden, it could become a 100 million valuation or 200 million valuation. Or hey, if you get bad data, then you go back. It's sort of like that, one of those old board games, where it goes back in reverse. So it's again, this is biotech. It's highly speculative, right, for investors, right? R&D is this is not for widows and orphans, as they say. So, but the upside is always huge. I mean, we've had some of the biggest winners we've had on our platform have been biotech stocks. Like we had Cytodyne that went up from 50 cents to $10.01 in like a year.
It's the cliche, risk reward, right? And so the risk is really high in biotech. The reward can be fantastic. So our approach is, how do you reduce the risk as much as possible? And I think for the stage that we're at, we've gotten, and I think I've explained here why that risk has been reduced as much as possible. Can't reduce all risk. But we think for the stage that we're at, we've got way lower risk than people appreciate. And I think that's going to be made clear continuously as we move towards.
We haven't had this in a long time. We have a super chat. You know what that is? A super chat on YouTube is when somebody actually makes it's a donation. Somebody's actually put in the King of K down $1 per share end of year.
So yeah, I do want to say that, thank you, and I want to make it clear that's not me saying that. That's someone else saying that.
I don't know this guy. No. This guy is or anything.
To be clear, that's what we're talking about. That kind of timeline, and that it's not that you wake up at 4 cents and one day it's just already at that type of valuation. Is that there's movement towards that valuation.
Yeah. And for example, so this guy is basically saying $1 a share, right? And $1 a share would, based on the current share count, would be roughly that's like a 300 million valuation approximately.
Yeah.
In the biotech space, when you have drugs in the pipeline that are they're addressing big markets.
I think it happens for sure. Yeah. Definitely. It's totally feasible. Yes.
It's really kind of 300 million is sort of like it's fairly common.
I mean, and I'm not here to make valuation estimates because it's offside for me to do that. Right. But there are valuations all over. Also, where we're at in terms of the biotech cycle, right? A large part of what determines evaluation of a biotech company is where's the biotech sector, and
where are we in this?
People would look at it now and say that we're at a pretty contracted valuation part of the biotech market. So a year and a half ago, you were at a massive high, and you're now you've had huge contraction since then. So I think that we don't know when it turns around and goes right back up, but this is a time to be looking at biotech companies because
it's interesting.
Downwards.
Yeah, biotech is cyclical, just like tech, and I had dinner with a guy who was a former a guy ran two biotech companies years ago. He's retired, but he was saying, and two of his the two stocks, they went up like, I think one of them was like a 30x or 50, crazy numbers, huge numbers. And he was saying, yeah, it's like right now we're at the bottom of the cycle. This is like, it's just a question of when does it turn. And I remember I've seen so many of these cycles and when it turns, all of a sudden it goes crazy. It's either overpriced or it's completely underpriced.
I think we've already had events that we've announced that in a regular biotech market we would have been revalued for, personally, So, but case in point, if the biotech market's not there, it's not there. But when the biotech market comes back, right, we'll see what happens.
Okay, I guess a comment here from Vincent. So the DMT, the delivery, the method of how you get it into the eye, super small under the eyelids. What?
Yeah, no, it's something you put in the eye. It's small. I don't want to say what it is because then you prior art yourself. If it's something we will eventually want to put a patent application on, but it's something that you would put in the eye. And there are different types of things that already. It's not that the concept of how you put it in the eye is new. It's that being used for this is new, and having to go develop it. As an example, a microneedle patch, they exist. But to take it and use it for something else and to do the engineering to use specifically for that medicine, for that sickness, is the work we're working on. So that's an analogy. So it's something you put in the eye, and that you can just live your life with, right?
Okay, excellent. So there's a lot of things to that kind of could be working in the favor of PharmaDrug in the coming months. Again, you got the cycle potentially turning. Again, a lot of microcaps have been beaten down in the last year now. With the market, with everything going on in in the world with wars and market crashes, and all the crazy stuff. So I think we're very close to a cyclical bottom in microcaps. So I think at some point there's going to be actually a lot of tailwinds that are going to be pushing PharmaDrug forward. In addition to obviously the fundamentals of the stock in terms of the clinical data. So on that said, Dan, in your opinion, this is the kind of question I always like to ask CEOs. Based on where you are right now, what would you say the top 3 reasons why investors, should consider PharmaDrug today?
I think that we've shown significant de-risking, although the risk is always there, but significant de-risking for having a drug in a clinical trial that's a platform, potentially a platform drug, like we talked about, used for many different things. And so that's not just a drug going through a clinical trial. That's a drug that can treat many different things. And I think that in itself is significant. That's number 1. Number 2, we're on our path there, and we're going to show the progress towards there over the next 6 months, 9 months. And I think that's a real reason to own the stock. And the last one is what we're doing on the psychedelic side. We're treating psychedelics like a true biotech. Basic research, mechanism of action, a unique delivery mechanism that you can patent. And I think that's a unique approach in the psychedelic sector. And I think that's a sector that's going to have a lot of interest again. And I think that's a sector that's going to continue to evolve. And I think that, as it evolves, there will be certain players that continue to move forward and some that don't. And I think that we're taking the right path because we're treating psychedelics as true biotech.
Yeah, I think let me just end on this note. I don't want to be too promotional here, but I like this. This is an audience commentary, which independent comment from somebody. But the path to $1, I just want to address this because this is interesting, right? Like with a biotech, it's always risk reward, right? If you have something very high risk, you want to have a very big upside. I mean, right. So for the stock to get to $1, basically, I think part of the path to get there is if you get some very significant progress towards in terms of the clinical data on let's say in terms of one of the cancer indications, and then institutional investors or more sophisticated investors, they kind of start to see PharmaDrug really as PD001, Cepharanthine, really being that platform. So it's not just just one indication. It could be multiple indications, multi-billion-dollar revenue business.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So, getting into the clinic, getting into a clinical trial with humans, and I think at that point you start to attract a very different type of investor base, and that's huge. And I think that people will be appreciating that as we move things forward.
Question here: should we be expecting more news releases for March?
I'm just trying to figure out the date.
Today's March 10th.
No, I think so. Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. On that note, Dan, I want to thank you.
Sometimes I just want to say, sometimes people email me. They ask me when's the next press release. Should be in a week or two. I mean, sometimes you think something's coming on a Monday, and then it ends up taking 2 more weeks because you're dealing with the lab and you had to get more data. So I'd like to be, I'd like to say this is the date the next press release comes out. I'm not in complete control of that because you're also dealing with third parties and things happen. And there's something I wanted to put out a press release on 2 weeks ago, and it'll probably have to wait another 4 weeks. And so, but there are many different things that we're working on. And yes, I expect news to continue to come. Okay, excellent, Dan. On that note, thank you. And I want to thank everybody for joining our live stream today. We'll see you all on the next one.